Welcome to the Melinda Eitzen Show. I'm Melinda. Today we have with us business broker Karl Taft.
Thanks for having me, Melinda.
Welcome.
Great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
So what is a business broker?
Business broker is just like a real estate broker. You know, we find businesses, business owners, and we help value their business, market their business, and ultimately help them transact through a deal. We do that for businesses that could be a $20,000 pizza joint to, a $30 million shipbuilding company.
So they're selling the business. Now, ideally, when would they bring you in? Like if I want to sell my business, do I bring you in the month before I'm ready to sell it, or what's the best approach?
Yeah, great question. I would say that, selling your business is like planting a tree. The best time to do it is, years prior, right? The second best time to do it is now. And I would argue that, or suggest to your listeners that, having a business health checkup is always a good thing, right? I think so many business owners have a feeling of what their business is worth or what their accountants have said their business is worth. But, talking to somebody that actually transacts in the marketplace and is buying and selling business on behalf of their clients is a very good resource to tap into when it comes to your business.
Okay. And so why years prior? Why do we need the years to plan? What's our planning? What planning is happening?
I mean, without getting into all the details, you want the biggest market that's interested in your business, right? It's one thing to go to the market and have one buyer say, I might be interested, convince me why I should buy your business. It's another thing to go to the market and have 100 buyers, competing against each other, right? Trying to buy the business. I mean, obviously the second in a scenario is better for both your price and the probability that the business is going to sell, right? So the reason you want years to plan is a lot of people don't have that amount of money to buy the business, which means they're going to need financing. And in order to need financing, right, their finances have to be in order, and that just takes time. Typically at least 2 tax seasons, preferably 3. And so, in an ideal world, the owner would say, okay, what's my business worth? And then what can I do to improve that? And how do I clean up my books? And then start that process. Right?
So there may be things we do in running our business that are fine while we're running it, but if somebody else is going to be looking at it as a potential purchase, it needs to look a little different.
100%.
And the books are a big part, right?
100%. And in my world, right, I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I'm more like, think of me like the quarterback or the coach, right? And I bring in those skilled, professionals.
You're
right?
an issue spotter.
Yeah, I'm an issue spotter. Exactly. Say, hey, you need to talk to a coach. I know a guy. You need an accountant. I know a gal. Whatever it is, right? And let's talk about that. And look, I understand. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. Like, I used to be an officer of a public company, right? And the mindset, profit, make as much money as possible. Present that to the marketplace because it drives your stock price. But in real America businesses, right, it's the opposite. I don't want to pay taxes. I want to take as much money home as possible, right? So we understand there's like these conflicting interests at play, right? You want to show profit in your business because that drives value. But if you're shielding that, now you have to convince the bank and the buyer that your business is
No, it really is. It really is making money. I just didn't want to tell anyone.
Look over here, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we work with and try to introduce them to people that make the most, have good advice to give them on how they can maybe minimize their taxes, maximize what a bank and a buyer will recognize, and ultimately give them the most money at the closing table.
Now, sometimes people have to sell not because they were planning it, so they haven't had years to plan, but something tragic happened. Like maybe the person running the business passed away and the family needs to sell it, or there's, in my world, a divorce action, which doesn't mean you have to sell your business, but sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Or something has happened. So what do you do in those cases? They don't have the 2 years of planning.
I mean, look, I will tell people this all the time, that their business is not that ugly, right? There is value, right? But if the goal is to maximize value over time, I say the best time to plan and prepare is today. I mean, I like to say that you shouldn't plan to sell your business someday. You should have a plan in place that you can sell your business any day.
Oh, that's smart.
right? And so you're just
Mm-hmm.
always, it's kind of like eating healthy. We shouldn't eat healthy once a month. We should,
Oh, come
you
on.
know, eat healthy, throughout the year. And having a business that's sellable is no different, right? And we find that, it's surprising, right? People, I mean, I was guilty of this as well as a business owner, right? You have this someday mentality. I think we
Mm-hmm.
as humans have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be happy if I have $1 million in sales. I'll be happy if I have 10,000 followers. I'll be happy
Mm-hmm.
if I get so many Google likes, right? And then you get to that point, and then what happens? You move the goalpost, usually, if you're like me,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so I would suggest that, having the mindset of like, no, I'm going to always be prepared to have a marketable business that
Mm-hmm.
buyers and banks will find attractive and be willing to finance is a better approach, because 95% of the businesses we sell, and we're talking about roughly 250 businesses a year, so a decent sample size,
A lot.
95% of those owners are typically putting time constraints on us. Why is that, right? They're not bad planners, they're not bad entrepreneurs, but
Mm-hmm.
they're human, right? Real human opportunities, real human challenges, real human
Mm-hmm.
crises. And they say, hey, Karl, we need to, because,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if they had
Mm-hmm.
taken the time ahead of time, then they're just always prepared for those situations.
Yes. Okay. Let's say someone didn't do any of that. It's too late. Should they still call you and say, please help me?
100%. 100%. We have done, I mean, you name it. We've sold businesses that the owner has passed away. We've sold businesses that the ex-wife technically owns it, but the husband runs it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's no challenge that we typically haven't seen. And we've sold some crazy businesses out there. I mean, worm farms, a profitable worm farm, if you can imagine that. So like, there's not a lot that will shock us.
Right. Okay. Is every business saleable? I think some people, they just shutter the business when they retire, and it doesn't occur to them that they might have a saleable business. And I don't know if saleable is even a word, but
Yeah.
can you sell every business or only certain types?
I mean, I wouldn't say that I could sell every business, but we
Mm-hmm.
can sell a lot of businesses. I mean, one of the businesses I actually sold this year was a contractor, and I love the owner, and I was so blessed that we were able to meet each other when we did, because his plan was his lease was going to expire, and his idea was, I'm just going to run the business, keep the lights on until my lease is up, and then I don't have to guarantee the lease, and I'm just going to liquidate. And I said, well, let me look under the hood and give you a business health check, right? So we
Yes.
look under the hood, and I say, hey, I can get you more money than your liquidation number. And I could get you exiting, 3 or 4 months before your lease even expires. And keep in mind, when we met each other, he only had 6 months left on his lease.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do these types of things. And he says, oh, great, sign me up. And found a strategic, ultimately successful sale. He's happy, buyer's happy, and it's a win-win for everybody.
That's great. So, to be kind of healthy all the time, which is our
Mm-hmm.
eating vegetables all the time,
Vegetables.
what are some tips that you could give business owners? Like, what does it mean? We know their books should probably be in better shape. How do they go about that?
Yeah, I would, and every business is different, but I would say that some reflection on putting yourself in the buyer's seat and just
Mm-hmm.
looking at your business, right? What are the risk points? Are you real good buddies with your staff? Are you real good buddies with your customers? Think about that from the buyer. The buyer's going to say, ooh, that's a risk when that individual is no longer there. What happens to
Mm-hmm.
the customers and employees, right? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's something that needs to be
Don't be
addressed.
as nice.
Yeah, don't be so nice to your employees. That's not what I'm saying. Maybe it's a customer diversification challenge. Maybe it's an employee skill set. Maybe there's too much reliance on one individual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are just other ways that maybe it's your how many hours a week you're working in the business, right? It's going to be more attractive if you work 5 hours a week in the business and the business does well versus 50 hours a week and the business does well,
Mm.
right? So owners' commitment and time requirements, customer concentration, employee concentration, and yes, of course, the financials. But there's a myriad of things that kind of go into that. And then there's this whole thought of, certain levels of profitability drives multiples. What I mean by that is, let's say a business makes 200,000 in profit,
Okay.
but that same business, if it makes maybe 300 1,000 in profit trades at a different multiple. So maybe at 200, it's worth 2 times that number, but at 300, it's worth 3.
Oh.
If you're an owner,
You need to level up.
yeah, exactly. It's like playing a video game, right? But you don't know that unless you talk to people in the business that say, hey, you're really close. And if you have a 5-year plan, maybe that gives you the energy, vision, and
To
focus
level up.
to focus up, right? Which makes it that much more profitable for you and attractive for you when you ultimately decide to sell.
You talked about when you're issue spotting, one thing you might do is say, hey, you need a coach. You mean a business coach?
I mean, a business coach, absolutely.
I have a business coach, and as you know, Sean Schoenemaker, and we love him. He's been
We
a
do.
huge help.
We do.
So if the business coach came in, that might help them to figure out how to level up.
100%. 100%. And talking to an accountant might teach them like, oh, I have these tax strategies that I can actually have an expense, not pay Uncle Sam, but oh, the bank will still look at that expense and add it back to my business, so I still get credit for that. Those are all things that a business broker can bring to the table and say, hey, you have the time. You should talk to these professionals.
Oh, it's so smart. Now, is it a common term of a buyout that the key person, who I assume is the owner, has to stay for a while?
It's not commonplace, but in my world, we like to say there's a customary 1 to 2 months transition period.
Oh, well, that's nothing. 1 to 2 months.
And
I
then,
was thinking more like you have to stay for a year, you have to stay for 2 years.
well, honestly, that's dependent on how well the business is run, too, right? If you are the business, a buyer is going to say, hey, we need you for more time. If the business is somewhat absentee, they're going to say, hey, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we're good.
Oh, that's a huge
Yeah,
difference.
yeah, absolutely. And then there's this idea of owner financing, too, since you talk about like
Yes.
owner transition, there's also owner financing, right? And so I would just throw that out for your listeners that, if your books are bad and need help, and that a buyer comes in and recognizes that, no bank will finance that. So where are they going to get financing from?
Oh, to buy it.
Most likely the seller.
Oh,
Right?
I
Or
see.
you as the owner, right? So that deal might be structured if your books aren't prepared, like, okay, the buyer's going to come and give me 30%, 40, 50%, and I'm going to have to be the bank for the remaining 50.
And have you seen that most of the time works out, or most of the time doesn't work out?
Oh, what do you mean by that? Like
That they-
after they sell?
Yeah, do they actually pay the rest of it?
I have personally not had that challenge, but unfortunately, I have talked to business owners where they said, "Hey, I took this deal and it didn't work out, and now I took my business back." And,
Yeah.
we try. I personally try to make sure that both the financials of the buyer and the skill set of the buyer match the business. So there's good synergies to try and make that transition as seamless as possible.
Because I know they have the protection of they get the business back, but when they think mentally, if they've come to the point, I think I'm selling my business, they don't really want it back.
Yeah, nobody wants it back. And some buyers will say, well, you can just take the business back. They don't want the business back.
Right.
The whole reason
They're selling it.
yeah, they're selling for a reason. Exactly.
They want the money. Well, and then I don't know if that would make it harder to sell it a second time,
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue into confidentiality.
Yes.
Right. And we see sometimes that owners say, hey, I'm smart. I have people that want to buy it. I'm going to sell my business. And that's great. I've sold my own businesses. I didn't use a broker. It can be done. But you have to be really sensitive and careful to the confidential aspect of things. Right. If employees, vendors, competitors, customers get word that you might be selling, does that negatively impact your business?
Right.
It could.
Yes.
Right. And you need to be prepared for that. And if it negatively affects your business, it's lowering your value.
Oh, good points. Good points
Right.
all. Okay, so I represent a lot of people in divorces who own a business. So I kind of see under the hood a little bit. And one thing I see a lot is they are running their whole life financially through that business. Like they do not pay a bill outside of the business. The business pays for everything, which I'm thinking is not proper. That the IRS would not say everything in your life is not a business expense.
100%. And look, there are ways to take some, not all, of those expenses and put it back. But it does cause messiness, and we call that recasting. But and again, that's where if I saw books like that and there was time, I'd be like, hey, you need to talk to this individual and see if you can clean those up. And there are strategies, right? I'm not an accountant, so for your listeners out there, run this by. But I have seen other entrepreneurs set up management companies, right, that are managing that company, and then they're running some of those expenses through that management company. But the books then at that point look very clean, right, and it's easy to
I've
distinguish.
had cases where they give their adult children credit cards who don't have any relationship to that business, and they're running around spending everything in their life, and it's going to like, wait a minute.
Yeah, in my world, I'm like, how much does the business make you a year,
Right.
Because it's a general way to get around it when you see, 5 pages of P&L line items, because there's all these miscellaneous expenses in there.
So they could talk to their CPA now and say, hey, what should I really be doing?
Correct.
What's the best? I know, one, they're just reinvesting everything in the business. These people who are living out of the business are also the types that they just reinvest everything in their business. The business is their whole life. They don't have another brokerage account. They're not taking money that they've earned and putting it in real estate. They're just reinvesting. So to them, everything is, right, the business. But they could get some advice on maybe this isn't exactly the best way to do this, and what are some tax strategies where you don't have to do it that way, but still get some benefits.
Correct. And I mean, this might be a kind of a good story to indicate for your listeners. I mean, some owners, right, they don't want to spend 35% on taxes, right?
No one does.
Who does, right? I get it. I get it. So you hide $1 of income, right? $1 of profit. Okay. But in your business, that dollar could be worth, when you sell it, $2, $3, or $5, and you're trying to save 30 cents.
It's not good thinking.
Yeah. And when life happens, right, and the human world appears out of nowhere, and you say, oh, I have to sell sooner, and you didn't have that preparation beforehand, then you lose out on that $2 to $5, let's say, in value.
Oh, that's such a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
My mother always used to say, you shouldn't be sad about paying taxes. You should be happy that you have enough money, that you're making enough money that you need to pay taxes.
Yes, exactly.
That's a good way to flip the script on paying the tax man. But there are some things I know from my own business. We've had some good tax planning with CFO and with accountants, and they've really helped us in ways we wouldn't know. We're not tax lawyers.
Right.
So we wouldn't have known, if you just do it legally, XYZ, then you'll save some money. Oh, good. Well, let's do that then.
Right.
So planning is the key. Their own little planning of just hiding it is not probably the best approach.
And you get full value for your business, right? I had a client, which, great business, but he was shielding a good portion of his income. And ultimately, when we sold his business, we sold it for half. And he was okay with that because he had to sell. The life got in the way, right? But had he had planned, he would have had a lot more at the closing table.
Yeah.
So he was happy, but there was more he could have had.
Yeah, he could have done better. Okay, so let's talk about types of business that you personally like to work with.
Yeah.
And I know that different business brokers might have different focus. What do you like to sell, or what is in your comfort zone?
Yeah. I think for a good part of my professional career, I was blue collar. I was manufacturing. I was services. Like I'm a truck driver, welder, construction guy, manufacturing, chemist. I like those type of businesses, but I've also sold nail salons, barbershops, glass contractors, mechanic shops. So I would say those types of businesses where somebody is using a wrench or a torch or a nail file, I like them. I don't typically do, attorneys, physicians, investments, insurance, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So when somebody is looking at a business, part of what you offer for your seller is a business valuation.
Correct.
So they get an idea, because maybe they don't know if they'd want to sell until they know how much could I get for it.
Correct. I would say that every relationship and client, it starts with just a complimentary conversation. I call it a PASS, a PASS, which is a pricing and sales strategy session. Like, let's just understand what the business might be worth today and the factors that are driving that value, and then what you could do over time to achieve more value, based on your energy, et cetera.
So how do you get paid ultimately? Somebody hires you, and is it like you said, it's similar to a realtor? Is it like a realtor? You get a percentage of the deal?
Correct. So at the end of the deal, when the seller gets cash in their jeans, we get paid. Right.
So you are incentivized to get them all the way to actual closing.
Correct. And we're also incentivized to give advice to help people get the most money for their business ahead of time, so that when they ultimately do decide to sell,
You're getting a percentage.
it's easier.
The
and it's
higher
worth,
the number.
Yeah, easier and worth more money.
Right.
Simple.
We want that.
Yeah.
We want that.
Yeah.
I know in deal making that sometimes the beginning of the deal conversation goes well, but there's a lot of work to do to get it to close.
Yeah.
They have to do some type of due diligence inspection. The deal could fall apart at any point.
100%. 100%.
So that's your job, right?
So in a realtor's world, right, they're staging, they're telling the owners, hey, you need to paint the walls and
Right.
clean up your yard and have curb appeal.
Yeah.
Business brokers are no different, right? So we want to see the books are clean, the business looks sharp, that the owner is coached a little bit, right, about how to present certain things, right? So a perfect example would be, is it difficult hiring people? What do you think 95% of owners are going to say?
Don't say that.
So we try to help them through those issues. I mean, it's difficult for everybody, right? Which means it's a
Right.
normalized challenge.
Oh, that's a great way.
Right.
That's a great way to say that.
Right.
Yeah, in my job, when we have trials or hearings, we have to prepare our clients to testify. And we're not telling them to lie. They need to tell the truth. But they can tell the truth in a better way or a horrible way.
There's wrapping.
Word choice is important.
Yes. Yes.
So you're helping them with that.
Yes.
You are also dealing with humans, and humans sometimes care about their business like a child.
100%.
So I'm sure that sometimes there's a challenge of getting it done because they want to sell it, but do they really want to sell it?
Yeah, 100%. I would say that I typically ask in a first meeting, like, two general questions, right? One is, generally, what were they looking to get for their business? And usually they fire right back, well, that's why I'm talking to you, right?
I don't know.
I don't know.
What
So we
can I
go
get?
do that. But then the second question, and maybe more telling, is, what are you going to do after you sell the business?
Right.
Right? They have to have a why, right? The business is so integrated into like who they are as people many times, right? There has to be a good reason or beacon, right? Something they're trying to achieve by selling the business. And so I try to clue in on those two things, because that's really the platform, if you will, of a successful transaction long term.
Okay, so you've helped them sell it. Maybe their why is they want to buy another business.
Yes,
Do you ever help people buy a business?
absolutely. Absolutely. People come to me on a regular basis and are asking the question like, hey, how do I find a good business? How do I look in these waters, if you will, for the right business that I've always wanted to? And, I think the best thing for people that are in that space is business brokers are your friends. Like, you should talk to them, because they see a lot of things very early before it ever hits the market. And it's always good to befriend them and say, hey, if you ever come up with
XYZ.
XY aquarium shop, right? If you see an aquarium
always
shop,
wanted to buy an
I've always
aquarium
wanted one. Let me know. I'm like, okay, another worm farm.
That's hysterical. Okay, well, that's good, because entrepreneurs are usually entrepreneurs till death. And
100%.
so once they sell that one, they're probably going to be looking for the next adventure.
Yeah.
And they might want to start something from scratch, but they might want to buy something.
100%.
They see an opportunity.
And those plateaus of profitability that drive different multiples of value that I was talking about earlier. I mean, one strategy is, if you're really close, go buy another business. And then
merge.
And then all of a sudden, your collective business is worth a higher multiple at the transaction. It's a strategy that many private equity firms use when they're rolling up companies. They're getting higher and higher multiples, but they're buying at a lower multiple.
So a common multiple you hear is 3 times EBITDA,
Yes.
right? But that's at some level.
Correct.
But it could go to a different level.
Correct. I mean, 3.5 is the average between 0 and 30 million in revenue, right? It's a huge range.
Yes.
I mean, the reality is on the lower side, it could be 1.2 or 2. It just depends on the industry. And on the higher side, it could be 8 or 10 or even more, depending.
That's a big
on those
difference.
things. Right. So if you're the owner and you understand where those plateaus go up in multiples, then you're better prepared as long as you have the energy and the time to do so.
Yes. This has been so interesting, Karl. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to have on the screen how to reach Karl. I highly recommend. He knows what he's doing. You can tell from our conversation that he knows what he's doing. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Melinda. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you all for watching. That is the show for today. Please tune in again, and we'd love to hear from you at melinda@d-elaw.com. Tell me what you want to hear about. Maybe you have some questions, and we can give you a follow-up answer. Thanks for tuning in to the Melinda Eitzen Show.